All right, welcome to the Zonos Decoding Cross-Border Ecommerce podcast. I'm sitting solo here as the host. Clint's traveling the world right now. We've got a lot going on in the postal world. He just was leaving the UPU Congress in Dubai, but things don't have to stop here on the podcast. We've got a special guest visiting us here in St. George, Utah. It's Ned Steiner from Sandler, Travis, and Rosenberg. Did I get that right?
That's right, yes.
All right. Ned, why don't you give us a little introduction to yourself? And I just want to talk all things trade, but give us a little idea of who you are, what Sandler, Travis, and Rosenberg does, and what brought you to St. George.
Sure, yeah. Well, Aaron, thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. Happy to visit your lovely facility here. So I work for Sandler, Travis, and Rosenberg. Sandler, Travis, and Rosenberg is a customs and trade law firm. I am not a lawyer. I play one on television. I am a consultant and lobbyist and have the great pleasure of working with Zonos in those areas. I have been with Sandler, Travis, ST&R for 18 years. Before that, I worked on the Hill for a couple members from California, and with a background in international relations, international economics, actually specialized in post-conflict reconstruction.
That's a mouthful. What does that mean?
Well, I was particularly interested in countries that were emerging from a civil conflict.
Okay.
And so I studied that actually in college, and then I continued on in grad school, and I ended up working in Guatemala for a little while, and then my last job was in Kosovo, and that was before I moved back to the States. So it was a very different path before, although that kind of international development work did lead me to trade, because there was always this question of, okay, how do you make this economy sustainable? And trade is one of the answers, right? If you make stuff and people buy it, then it's sustainable. So we didn't realize it at the time, but that was starting to lay the groundwork for me to start working in trade.
No, that's fantastic. And by the way, I'm very appreciative of the dress code that you followed coming here to Zonos, because every time I've seen you, it's been in a suit and you wear suspenders, right? Because that expedites the security process as you're going through buildings in DC,
That's
right?
right. I don't have to take off my belt, yeah.
But yeah, you definitely asked what the dress code would be, and I had to tell you to tone it down a little bit.
Yeah, I was way overdressed.
Yeah, you still got a collar on, so
it's true.
But no, it's. I'm glad we got you up here to St. George, and you were just in Vegas, right?
Yes, I was invited to provide the keynote at the International Fasteners Conference, screws and bolts and the like. And that's a bigger business than maybe either of us knew.
Is it fascinating?
It's fascinating. I was tempted to use that pun, but I did not use it. I figured that they had heard it before.
They probably have heard that one before. Do you know what the greatest invention is of the last 100 years, though?
No, I don't.
It's actually the whiteboard.
Really?
Yeah, it's remarkable.
Oh, I like that. Very good.
There's another one you can tell somebody. So, all right, so you were just in Vegas, and we're just a short 2-hour drive or so. I'm guessing is what it took you to get up here, right?
Yeah.
And so why not? For this close, we've been out to DC to work with you. And in fact, that's kind of the background we can talk through of how we started engaging and getting to know each other more. At the beginning of this year, we didn't do much in DC at all. We've been helping companies sell everywhere in the world, but the US was never really needed because we had such a high de minimis. And so our software and our technology wasn't needed that much on US imports when it comes to e-commerce. However, a few things changed at the beginning of this year, and we recognized that there was a technology need for the U.S. to be able to handle all of these low-value shipments because the administration was trying to remove the de minimis here into the U.S. And that's where we we didn't have all the inroads and connections that we had, and that's where we ended up engaging with you. And I think we've had conversations over the years, off and on, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, it's interesting how the universe brought us together. Years ago, I was working on setting up something called the E-commerce Coalition, and because I was convinced that the stakeholders in the e-commerce universe were not being heard in all of these various conversations. And so we organized an event on the Hill, and it had CBP and eBay, I think, and a Congressman Polis, who later became the governor of Colorado. And I think I was in touch with Clint at that point and trying to get him.
And what year was this?
This would have been 2007, 8, something like that.
That would have been right at the very beginning of Zonos.
Yeah, they didn't have, it wasn't the Zonos
it was like
name.
Global.
It was Global something.
Yeah. Fascinating.
So, so we had that initial conversation, and I remember you had some other folks that worked for you that I was in touch with sort of via LinkedIn, and every once in a while I would kind of send notes about, hey, this is going on in e-commerce, and but it was a mutual friend who brought us together, who was having a conversation, I think, with Clint and you, and said, oh, I know a guy in DC you should talk to.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. So, yeah, this is where it's been a little bit of a wild ride for us. We don't know how to navigate DC or anything. And that's where you guys have been a tremendous help in helping us just get to the right people to say, hey, like we can help. And so fast forward to now, and the last 6 months or so felt like 60 years and everything that's gone on and all the things that have changed. And you've been in DC for 18 years.
Wow. I mean, I've been at Sandler Travis for 18 years.
Sorry.
But...
You've been at Sandler Travis for 18 years.
Yeah.
And in DC for how much longer before that?
Well, I mean, I've probably been in DC 30 plus years. Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever seen an environment like this?
No, it's a very dynamic environment. Lots of changes, lots of, things that folks never thought would be done are being done. And that's both exhilarating, as we experienced, being able to walk in and talk with, people in the administration and with members of Congress and senators and so forth. But it's also terrifying because you really don't know what's next. And you have to kind of prepare for everything. So no, it's a very different environment. Usually, you follow procedures and there are timelines, and you submit a request to appear, and then you go to a hearing, and then they review your submission, and et cetera, et cetera.
There's usually a very long runway to changes that are happening and plenty of time to plan and prepare for that.
Indeed.
And that has definitely not been the theme of 2025. In fact, the latest executive order was 30 days. And it wasn't just, carriers and posts and others around the world to figure out how to react to this, but even within the government, Customs and Border Protection now has to react and respond and put things in place to be able to account for the changes, which is, I mean, how long would it normally take? Like, what's the typical timeline in years past of a change? Like, we see de minimis changing in the big, beautiful bill that gives 2 years for everyone to get things in order. But
well, under Biden, you had a notice of proposed rulemaking regarding de minimis, right? And they had a whole process that was ongoing before all this other stuff overtook it. In fact, I think technically that process is still outstanding. I don't think they formally closed it, although it's very, as we say in DC, OBE, overtaken by events. Mm-hmm. So there's a process, and it takes a long time. It takes a long time to gather the information, to assemble the stakeholders, to have, sort of troubleshoot what's going to happen. Then you have to have clearance through the agencies, the various general counsels, sign off on things, and it goes up and up and up through the assistant secretaries and so on. And then it finally gets to the president. And this was just on the rocket docket, happen. And that's, as I said, both exhilarating, but also terrifying. And we were talking about this earlier about Congress's role, because they did legislate on the de minimis in TIFTIA in 2016. So it's not that they're not interested in the topic. It's just that I think were kind of overwhelmed by how quickly the administration acted, and now they're sort of deciding how they want to respond.
Yeah, it seems like trade in general has just shifted to a whole another gear that the industry isn't used to yet, and everyone's trying to just hold on for the ride.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it this way. Like, think about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, right? That had such a long runway because you had the initial conversations with the P4 with Australia, and then different countries would join the group, the United States, and then you had Japan, and so it sort of slowly built up, and then you had round after round of negotiations, and everybody showing up for the negotiations and making sure that their issue was on the table, and because it was about mutual market access, right? Mm-hmm. These deals that the administration is working out they're not really trade deals. They're tariff deals. It's basically the other country says, I will do XYZ so that the U.S. doesn't impose a steeper tariff. But the U.S. itself isn't doing anything. I mean, the U.S. is just not making it more difficult for these other countries. In another context, in formal trade agreements, the U.S. provides market access, or did in the past. And that becomes enshrined in law when Congress takes up the trade agreement and passes the trade agreement. That we're not in that world anymore.
This isn't your typical trade agreement. This is a whole another dynamic.
And part of it is because it's not, I mean, when you think about it, I was talking about it today, actually. I think it's only, it's the UK and Japan that have executive orders associated with them, and then the one with the EU is only a joint statement. So that's to say there's no paper that people have signed. It's very difficult to know what the permanence of it. The reason why there's an agreement is because the administration has threatened reprisals if the other side doesn't agree, which is one of the reasons why I think that even if the IEEPA tariffs get struck down by the court, they'll probably be replaced by other tariffs. And also the other countries are not going to want to change the agreements, because at the end of the day, they don't want the administration to punish them. And so they'll keep doing what they've agreed to do.
When you say other tariffs would come in, what are some other things that you think would come in and replace IEEPA?
Oh, well, there's Section 122 and there's Section 338. I mean, these are different authorities that haven't been used to impose tariff, but they could be used to impose tariff. And it's actually more explicit than IEEPA. It says the president may impose a 15% tariff in the case of the 122, or a 50% tariff in the case of 338.
Are those are time bound though, aren't they?
338, I believe, is, but 122 isn't. But you have a majority in Congress that's going to support what the president's doing. So
So why did they go the IEEPA route?
It packed the biggest punch. The president could basically do whatever he wanted to, very little oversight. And as you've seen, he's, 135% tariff on China or 50% tariff on India. There's been no limit, no oversight, no requirement for consultation or renewal or justification even. All he has to do is say it's a national emergency, and so I'm going to go ahead and do what I'm doing. So he didn't have to jump through any hoops. 301.
And it sounds like he had a lot more flexibility on the rates he could impose and the way he could approach it.
Total flexibility.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's a rational actor. I mean, you have either I can do a 301 investigation, which is going to take time and require to accept comments and, whatever, or I can just do tariffs tomorrow.
Yeah.
What do you think he's going to do?
Tariffs tomorrow.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, as we talk through this, I look at my experience throughout all of this, and I'm very plugged into the e-commerce, duties and taxes. Like, that's kind of been a lot of my time spent there over the years. And it's hard to keep up. Like, it's really hard to keep up. We have to constantly update our software to just understand the changing dynamics, because things change extremely rapid now. And you got a matter of hours for notice on some of these as well, and not days or weeks or months, but it could literally be hours. And so I'm assuming this is where software and technology has been a big help, and this is where it's been, a lot of people have needed our tools more now than ever. But I'm assuming the same thing for you as well, because you're doing a lot of advising and counsel for importers, right?
Yeah,
and
we're sort of the analog Zonos.
Yeah.
No, I mean, people are just so overwhelmed by everything. I remember, I was talking with this one client about our plan to move forward, and every time I brought up some action that we would take, something else had come and they wanted to talk about that first. Well, oh no, the derivatives, new derivatives for steel, new tariffs on steel, aluminum derivatives. Oh, here's this new copper thing. Oh, here's this change in the reciprocal. So it's like, yeah, constantly trying to deal with whatever's new. Japan, details drop, and because we do trade of all products, all from all over the world, we have clients that, have issues. You name a particular tariff, dollars to donuts, we've got a client that's trying to deal with it.
So tell me a little bit about your team that you have to have in place to be able to keep up with all of this, to be able to actually still give current sound advice to all of these importers.
Well, I'm very fortunate. I'm working with a number of very knowledgeable, very skilled customs attorneys, very experienced, and some of them have a lot of experience in one area of the law or one, or products, certain products. And because I've been working at Sandler Travis for so long, I have a good sense of who I can go to for help on, the nitty gritty on this, that, or the other. Although we are getting new people. And so I'm having to learn new names and new areas of expertise.
You've had to grow your team a little bit this year?
Just a bit. Yeah. So I'm also, I go to my colleagues and I'll say, hey, I've got this issue. Who do you think would be the best professional to, either a senior attorney or an associate to handle this issue? So there's a lot of that kind of information sharing that goes around the firm of who's the best to handle this. And we just had that on an issue this morning of who would be a good person to handle, an OFAC issue,
Yeah. And this isn't something where it's one problem for one particular industry. This is impacting everybody. Like, you were just at a fastener conference,
right? And
they were all up in arms over steel and aluminum, right?
Well, yeah. They need to know now that the administration has said you pay tariff on steel content, right? Well, how do you value steel content?
I don't know. Do you have to probably consult with an expert on how to do that? Right?
And I kept on saying that over and over. I was like, I can tell you generally, what the guidelines are, but your product is very specific. You need to talk with an expert about this. But there have been a few occasions where a company was paying the full 100%. And then we went back and saw that, oh no, there was a lining applied or something like that wasn't steel. And so they shouldn't be paying tariff on that non-steel component. and there's a line that where this should be subject and this shouldn't be subject. And there's actually kind of a debate. You and I were talking about the need for customs guidance on certain things, or but also be careful what you wish for, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many outstanding questions, and customs sometimes doesn't have the answers, or they might have conflicting answers. So that makes it especially challenging.
Yeah, and I have a lot of empathy for them in this environment too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So this is moving extremely fast for everyone. So,
and we rely on customs very heavily. Like at this point, if you see an executive, or we sort of classify it as, there was a true social. Okay, well now we're paying attention. It's not law, but the president said something, so we're paying attention. Or a press conference or something. When it starts to get real is if there's an executive order or a proclamation. Oh, okay, we need to pay attention, but that's not the end of the story. Then you're going to get maybe a Federal Register notice. That's going to flesh things out a little bit more. But the rubber hitting the road is really the CSMS, the message from customs that's telling how to file for this particular thing. That's really the decoder ring that you need in order to act, right?
I like the reference there, by the way. One of the all-time greatest movies. No, that's, they probably are working overtime a lot, writing those, all the new guidance constantly. So this year has been very dynamic. We'll use that word. That sounds like a good word.
Good word.
Things are changing rapidly. Obviously, you guys are helping a lot of people. We're trying to help a lot of people. I mean, I think that's when you look at someone that's importing goods into the U.S. or if you're a foreign seller selling goods into the U.S., what advice do you give them for navigating all of this? There's a lot of noise, a lot of things going on, and honestly, I see some different advice out there that maybe is questionable. And you want to make sure you're staying compliant and not getting on the radar of customs. But how do you navigate all of this to make sure, A, you're being the most efficient you can be with your operations and you're not overpaying on tariffs, but at the same time that you're really compliant and navigating all of the proper rules and channels that you need to? What's kind of your advice to sellers out there?
That's a very good question. I think the first is don't chase after every shiny object, right? That there's going to be a lot of conversation. There's going to be someone saying something, somebody else saying something. They're just saying things, right? That's not law. And it's important to pay attention to the details. And those will be presented through, as I said, the process, executive order, Federal Register, CSMS. But you need to wait before you act to see exactly what those details are, and not just on hearsay. There's a lot of talk about this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And sometimes it doesn't materialize, right? So I'm often saying, I'm going to wait until I get, the final word before we react, right? The other thing is that, be diligent in your compliance. Don't just go on what your competitor's doing. Oh, I heard that I don't have to file because this, that, and the other. I'm not subject because this. Do your own homework. Do your own research with a qualified professional. Because, there's a lot of talk out there, and because of all of the things that are happening, people are desperate to find solutions. I'll give you a perfect example: classification. When the China Section 301 tariffs were established in 2018, and then you had the exclusions, more importantly, established shortly thereafter, companies flocked to those exclusions, and they, went to the broker, and the brokers went to them and said, hey, is there any way that my product could be classified so that I can take advantage of this exclusion? That is not the way to go about classifying a product, right? I mean, a good is classified under an HTS because it's supposed to be there, right? And that's the best classification. you don't have a million different choices. I mean, there are ways of like engineering the product so that it falls under a certain classification, but you don't classify based on how much the tariff is. and I think people are really, they're trying to find ways, to survive. And I understand that. I understand the impetus, but it's really important just to be rigorous and to follow the rules and
maybe be truthful and honest about what you're doing. Truthful. That could probably be, I've seen a lot. And I think we've seen even more creative ideas in e-commerce. Let's say, because it didn't just go from one tariff to another. It went from nothing to now you have a whole bunch of foreign sellers selling into the US that never even had to worry about tariffs. And then a lot of different ideas being floated around that are creative, some compliant, some maybe questionable, on how to lower your tariff exposure.
Right.
And but anytime you increase tariffs and increase costs, this happens in income taxes too, right? And anything else, you get creative ideas on how to lower those costs. And you just have to make sure you're towing the right line, that you're focused on staying compliant. And yeah, to your point, maybe there is engineering changes that make sense. Or maybe you need to move inventory into the US now because it makes sense to lower the value of the goods that you're importing in. And that's where, there can be games played with the HTS code, there can be games played with the country of origin, and there can be games played with the value of the product. But you just need to make sure everything is compliant because, they're going to be watching, and you don't want to get on the bad list.
They are definitely watching, and they are in full enforcement mode, and cracking down on tariff evasion. And yeah, there are legitimate ways to mitigate the tariff, to reduce your tariff exposure. But there are also a lot of ways you can do it that are illegal. Mm-hmm. And you're running a huge risk. And of course, as a law firm, we would never recommend that.
Yes.
But the thing is it's a very challenging environment. It's a challenging environment because, on the duty side, but it's also a challenging environment on the compliance side because there are all these other kind of, we call them PGAs, participating government agencies, that require information from sellers. And e-commerce is this, for the government, I was going to say it's this new world. It's a new world for the government, private.
The U.S. government specifically.
U.S. government, right. Other countries have kind of started adapting already, but mm-hmm. It's a new world, and they're trying to figure out, okay, who should be on the hook for this information, or I'm asking the importer of record to give me all this information, but do they have all this information? The issue with e-commerce was always the importer of record is the ultimate consignee who doesn't know the first thing about HTS classification. So this still remains, right? And I think it's great that Zonos is there to provide some solutions. And I think this challenge will persist. And other agencies, as they try to get more information, it'll be interesting to see how customs sort of navigates that and plays a sort of intermediary role between the private sector and the different agencies that want this information or that information.
No, absolutely. And I'm going to be excited to see 6 months from now, when we reflect back, how many things change in the next 6 months. I want to kind of just, wrap this up with a question for you. In all your time, all your experience, you've had some unique things, Kosovo, and where else did you live? I just totally... Guatemala, as well as your time in DC. And you've worked on a number of things, including, I imagine, a lot of different experiences. What's one or two things that stick out as memorable, or something you're proud of, or something that was funny? Like, just give us a couple stories from your background here.
So I was actually telling this story the other day. I was on the Hill for 9/11, and that was a very, but take apart everything that we learned about what happened. I'm saying at the time, it was very disconcerting because we were hearing all this news, and we were evacuated from the building. And there were reports that there were still planes in the sky that were heading for DC, and people didn't know what to do. But the reason I mention it is because shortly thereafter, President Bush came to a joint session of Congress and addressed Congress.
How fascinating.
And I was there. I had the opportunity to be at the address. And it was an amazing time because it was a moment where everybody had put aside politics. And I'm not just saying that. I'm not like, being Pollyannish about it. Like, everybody really set it aside. And you could tell that everyone in the room was looking at the president and willing him to bring the country together and to move forward. And it was a tremendous experience. And it just, it was a lesson to me that we can come together. And I think, this is a time where, again, we need that sorely. But it's possible, but it takes, a lot of intentionality. And I hope that we can do that. I hope we have the strength and the leadership to be able to come together as a country and move forward.
I absolutely love that. That's inspiring. I remember I was in college when that all happened. I remember the emotions, and everybody came together. It didn't matter what your personal ideas were. Everybody came together. And, I've had some other experiences in my life. We don't need to talk here, but where you see good in people.
Absolutely.
And we all have different ideas and different beliefs, and that's fine. But we're all good people, and we need to see each other that way. So thank you for that. I think that's a great way to wrap this up. Ned, thank you. You've got some more travels to start working your way back to DC. I appreciate your time coming to St. George. And until next time, thanks.
Thanks so much. My pleasure.